The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. It's time for the Guillotine Grapevine, a podcast for the land of 10,000 wrestlers. 10,000 wrestlers. Now, here's your host, award-winning wrestling broadcast journalist, Jason Bryant.
And welcome back. Another episode of The Guillotine Grapevine, a product of theguillotine.com, the greatest wrestling publication ever for the state of Minnesota. Jason Bryant here with you today, talking with national championship head coach Steve Costanzo of the St. Cloud State Huskies. The Huskies picked up the third national title, third in the last 4 years, and the eighth straight year, Coach Costanzo, your team has been number one or number two in the country to end the year. First of all, welcome back to the program and congratulations on yet another national title there in St. Cloud.
Well, thanks, Jason. Appreciate you having me.
So a lot of things go into winning a national championship. You've got to have the right blend of veterans, rookies, guys that step up, guys that improve throughout the course of the season. And before you even looked at March in Cedar Rapids on the schedule, what was your overall goals on how good this team could be this year?
Well, we never really talk about national championships or anything like that. I mean, our goal was just to put our best product on the mat each and every competition and perform to the best of our ability. And we really never overlooked anybody. We took one match at a time, one competition at a time. And when we got to the NCAAs, you don't really need to say much to these guys. They had accomplished a lot during the season. And they knew what the stakes that were on the line for sure.
When you go into goal setting, though, I mean, you say you don't talk about national championships, but since you've arrived, the program has reached new heights. You've got national duels titles. You've won 130 of your last 135 dual meets. You seem to put a focus on team depth and winning a dual meet. How much do you feel like your dual meet schedule really helps prepare your team and the Division II landscape for the postseason?
Well, I think it really helps prepare our team. Obviously, we wrestled 19 duels this year, and what's interesting is 22 guys on our roster competed in those 19 duels, so it wasn't just the same 10 guys competing week after week. And I think what that does, it just obviously we have a lot of depth. So that's some of the keys to our success is just being able to rotate guys in and out, rest guys when we need to. Develop our guys that maybe don't get a lot of varsity time and so forth. So I think that's definitely been one of the keys to our success in duels over the years. It's just the amount of depth that we have and the fact that we wrestle so many guys and so many duels.
When you arrived, you had come off a national championship at Dana College in the NAIA. The landscape in the NAIA in Division II, to the layman may seem the same, but they're drastically different. And what was the biggest adjustment that you had to make coming from the NAIA to coach a Division II program that when you look back at it now, you're like, man, that was a little tougher than I thought?
Well, I mean, both divisions are pretty comparable. I would say the difference between the two maybe are the lower, placings of individuals in terms of the All-Americans, like, your 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th place guys. But other than that, when you look at the landscape in NAIA compared to Division II, I mean, the top guys in NAIA can compete at any level, Division II, III, and even some cases Division I. We know that for a fact, So as far as making adjustments when I got here, I didn't, I don't know. Wrestling's wrestling, and I just did the best that I could to, bring the philosophy over from Dana to St. Cloud State that we had there that was successful for us, and kind of implement it into our program here. So obviously, I've needed to make some changes over the years and so forth. It's not the same philosophy. Well, it's the same philosophy. It's not the same training methods year after year after year. You've got a different group of individuals that you're working with and so forth. You've got a different mentality. You've got, you got young guys versus veterans and so forth. So each year is a little bit different in terms of our training and so forth.
Now, I was still turning back the clock a bit because there hadn't been a national championship in school history until you arrived. Now you've got 3 of them. What has been the response from the administration from when you were first hired those years ago to be like, okay, what are your goals? And now you got 3 titles. You got 3 big old trophies sitting in that trophy case at Hallenbeck Hall.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely think they appreciate it, and they just appreciate I think more importantly, they appreciate the kind of character that our kids have. Winning's always nice, and, while it's important, I think they're more impressed with the type of character that our kids have, not just on the mat, but off the mat. They're succeeding in the classroom. We're involved in several community service projects throughout the year. I think overall they're just proud of our program, and that's something that we spend a lot of time with in terms of talking about life skills and so forth with our guys. It's not always about winning, and while winning's important and winning's fun, the most important thing is when they leave here, they have a degree, and they make a big impact in their communities when they leave here as well.
One thing that the state of Minnesota can produce in its quality high school wrestling, and there's a lot of Division II and Division III programs within the state that are battling for that stuff. Of course, there's the Gophers in Division I, the only Division I program in the state. But when you look at the makeup of the roster, yes, there's a lot of Minnesota. There's a lot of Midwestern kids, but I sit there and I look and say, wow, Illinois. You've hit the state of Illinois pretty hard. How is the sales pitch from a kid from Illinois to come to St. Cloud State in the winter?
Well, we just tell them it's nice here all the time. No, we've got a little bit of a connection going on there. It's funny because a lot of these guys, they all know each other and so forth. So I think sometimes they look at it like these kids look at it. Well, if it's good enough for that kid, well, it's good enough for me. So, we've just been real fortunate to get into that state and dip into that state a little bit. It's obviously an outstanding wrestling state, very competitive, and we've had pretty good luck with those kids coming over, and we've got a few more coming from Illinois as well for this upcoming year. So, we've got a lot of kids from Illinois. There's a lot of kids from Minnesota on there, a few from Wisconsin, Nebraska, and then obviously some kids from out east, out west as well. So, but it's a state that Illinois is definitely a state that we hit as hard as we can.
Yeah, I'm still wondering about the recruiting pitch to the kid from Florida.
Yeah, well, he wrestled junior college in the Midwest, and North Iowa area community college, and I think he's just used to that, but the thing that he recognized the most was how competitive it was in the Midwest, and that's where he wanted to wrestle. He wanted to wrestle with the best, and right here in the Midwest, it's, obviously you can't beat it.
We've had this conversation with pretty much every coach at the Division II and Division III level in the state of Minnesota and the upper Midwest about the challenges of being a Division II wrestling coach and trying to bring, I guess for lack of a better term, better than Division II talent. We've already been through the fact that these kids can't compete, but kids that may have their aspirations to be Division I and convincing them that this is the place where they can thrive and succeed. So, how has your recruiting mantra, I guess, changed over the years since you've gone from the NAI, which is a different type of recruiting angle, to Division II, where you've got scholarships, but you're also it's still some people still have that stigma. Well, if you're that good, why don't you wrestle Division I?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Jason, it is still quite a challenge, especially in the state of Minnesota, convincing kids that, there are other avenues besides Division I, Division II, Division III. I mean, really good wrestling divisions, very competitive. It is quite a challenge. Most of the kids that I talked in the state of Minnesota, whether they're a state champion or not, they have aspirations of Division I wrestling. But I think if they ever attended Division II championship or came to a dual meet that was highlighted by a couple really good teams, they'd see that obviously this is a very competitive division. And so I guess we just try to get them on campus. That's the main thing. If we can get them on campus and then visit with them about our approach to the sport of wrestling and the opportunities they have in terms of competing on our schedule. We don't just compete against Division II. We compete against Division I, Division II, Division III, NAI. It doesn't matter. And then they see that some of the kids here that are having success, and then having our kids here visit with them about the opportunities that they've had or the experiences they've had really goes a long way.
When you look at the academic profile and then the athletic profile, everything that comes together with the student athlete experience, one thing that it's kind of hard to ignore is the success of sports at St. Cloud State, even though the school recently went through some tough decisions in dropping certain sports, but wrestling stayed and you guys have been thriving. The baseball teams had a really good run with some really successful seasons. Of course, hockey is kind of, even though you guys have won the national championships there 3 times, hockey's still king in that town. And how do all those sports and those coaches all kind of coexist with one another and kind of feed off each other and generating interest for recruiting?
Well, we're really fortunate that we have really some really good coaches here. So they work really hard. You know, many of our programs are not fully funded, so to speak. So, you know, besides the hockeys and so forth. So, you know, these coaches really have to work hard in terms of, you know, fundraising and you know, generating interest in their sport in terms of marketing, things like that. So, you know, St. Cloud State's really fortunate to have some really good people, some great leaders in their programs. You know, obviously hockey's a sport here. Our men's hockey program, they're currently ranked number 1 in the nation. They've got a really good shot to do some really special things. And, you know, a lot of focus is on Division I hockey here, but, you know, nothing, you know, we're definitely getting the recognition that we deserve, and we're doing the very best we can in our Division II sports.
One thing I also want to draw some attention to is your radio guy, John Peterson, is a guy who started doing matches there in 2012. He's actually now been a voice, Matt's side at the NCAA Division I championships, of course, has been with you guys at the Division II championships and all your home duels the last several years. Having that type of media exposure, not with just, you know, coming out of, you know, what Tom Nelson does from Sport Information and Athletic Communications, but having it seem big time by being on the radio locally and traveling around the country and streaming. I mean, how much has that done for the reach of recruiting and the reach of these parents? Because like, yeah, well, if I can't make the match, I could still always listen to it.
Well, John's been a tremendous asset, obviously. I think he's been with me for, I don't know, any 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, but he has just done a tremendous job. He's so passionate about the sport, and he knows so much about the guys off the mat. So that it just, you know, having John on the radio has just created another dimension for our marketing, for our availability for our parents to listen in, or fans to listen in when they're not able to go to the matches and so forth. So it's really added just a special, another special recognition or opportunity for our fans, and just, you know, we're just really thankful for what he's done. He's just done a tremendous job. And like I said, the man's passion for the sport, the man's passion for Husky wrestling is above and beyond anyone. So I just can't thank him enough for what he's done. And you know, most of all of his services are volunteer services. You know, he doesn't get paid a lot, if anything, to do what he does. And, you know, that just really says a lot about the individual.
Now we can shift to talking about Cedar Rapids, the program's 3rd national championship, and a type of tournament that was talk about streaks, ups and downs, and you know, going in, what was the team's perspectives, and what do you think had to happen day 1 to set things up for day 2, and you know, there were some things that craziness happens in Division II championships.
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, we were fortunate to get 10 qualifiers. That's the first time in our program history that we've ever qualified all 10. So to bring 10 guys down to that tournament had some advantages, but obviously when you bring 10 guys down to the tournament, you got to do something with those 10 guys. So, you know, I knew that we had a little room for error, you know, by bringing 10, but I also knew that a team like Notre Dame that brought in 7 guys, that and Ashland had quite a few qualifiers as well, and you know, that McKendree, I mean, I think they had 6 or 7 qualifiers as well. You know, they had some 6 or 7 bullets that we're going to produce for them. So, while we were really confident with 10 qualifiers, you know, realistically, we knew that you know, we needed to punch in at least, you know, 6, 7, 8 All-Americans to be right in the thick of things. And fortunately, we were able to get 6 out of the deal, but not only 6, we had some six guys that really produced with some bonus points that really made a difference for us in the tournament.
Yeah, over the course, it looks like you guys picked up 6 falls, a tech, and 2 majors. That's for those mathematically challenged like myself. I had to do it 3 or 4 times, 15.5 extra points, and you win the tournament by 8.5 over Notre Dame College. Final team scores 92.5 for St. Cloud, 84 for Notre Dame College. Cal Baptist at 70.5, and Upper Iowa, the host institution, 58. Of course, this is the last year we'll see Cal Baptist as that school reclassifying to Division I. And let's talk about what Lenny had done at Cal Baptist in the few years they were Division II. I mean, definitely added another hammer school to contend with. I mean, you're kind of sad to see him leave, but you might not be sad to see him go at the same time.
Well, I really am sad to see him leave because they really added another a very competitive team in Division II. And Lenny's done a tremendous job, and he's just a class act, and all of his guys are a class act. And, you know, anytime that you were going to face one of their guys, you knew you had to be ready to go. Sometimes you look at their records, and their guys are a little bit deceiving. You know, they might have, 8, 9, 10, 11 losses, but regardless, you knew you were going to be in for a battle. You know, they're coached by Lenny Zaleski, and, Derek Moore's out there. Mike Mena's out there now. I mean, he got a great coaching staff, and I think they're really setting themselves up quite well for Division I. But we're definitely going to be sad to see him leave for sure.
Going weight by weight, Brett Velasquez finishes 4th in a weight that ended up being won by Eli Hale, who was on the roster at Oklahoma State for most of his career and then ends up coming through. He's like, all right, I'm going to give it a shot at Central Oklahoma. You've also got Justin Portillo, Nebraska Kearney, who transferred over from South Dakota State. So, the landscape of Division II can change from semester to semester drastically. And you've got, Ivan McClay and Velasquez, 2 guys that know what it takes to win wrestling for 3rd and 4th. I mean, just talk about the depth of 125 and what Brett had to deal with here.
Well, that was definitely a tough weight. You look at 2 returning national champions in the bracket, and then you got this Eli Hale kid transferring in from Oklahoma State and Portillo from South Dakota State. It really added some quite depth to that weight class. So, I'm really proud of Brett. Brett's one of those guys where he gives you everything that he has all the time, and not just at the national tournament, but I can talk and speak volumes about what he's done throughout the entire season. He's a really team-oriented type of guy. So, for example, when he comes off the mat and loses a close match, I mean, he's apologizing to me. That's just the type of kid that he is. And there's no need for that because I know that he gets out there and gives it everything he has. And that's all we ever asked out of him. In that match for 3rd and 4th, against the Notre Dame kid. I mean, we are in on, we end up losing the match 3-2 on a penalty point towards the end of the match there. But, we're in on, 7-8 shots attacking for 7 minutes. You just had a hard time capitalizing and finishing those attacks on that individual. But he's got a lot. We are so proud of Brett and everything he represents about our wrestling program here. And a model individual off the mat in terms of, his faith and what he does in the classroom. And, I just can't say enough good things about that guy. But that was a really tough weight. And, any given day, I mean, there could have been a different winner there. There could have been a different champion. But Eli Hale is a special individual, and I wasn't surprised by the results. Kind of been following him all year long, and you got to give that guy a lot of credit. He did a great job.
When you've got a kid like Brett who had success this freshman year, kind of that, it was almost like a dream type of movie script type of thing where you're not the starter and then all of a sudden you win the spot and you win a national title. Is it hard to try to balance early success with, consistent success, I guess?
Well, I just, one of the things I worried about when he won it was, okay, what kind of pressure is Brett going to put on himself now over the course of the next few years? Is he going to, it's a really difficult situation to be in, I guess, if you win it as a freshman. But, the thing Brett realizes, and he's matured enough to realize this, is it's one match at a time, and it's about just giving your best effort every time you step on the mat. And I keep trying to tell him that's really what it's all about. If you know that you've given everything that you can, you've trained the right way, then how can you have any regrets about the results? So that's one thing that I really try to emphasize with him is just going out, doing the very best you can, enjoy it, have fun, and savor the moment, and live in the present. So that's one of the things that I try to do with him, and I think he's really bought into that. He's out there, and he realizes that, you know, he can lose a match at any time and things like that. But most importantly, he has to make sure that you know, he's preparing himself the right way, and he's giving a great effort every time he steps out there, and that's what he does.
Yeah, going weight by weight. Actually, I want to back this up. I want to disrupt our channel here and kind of more go round by round, because we look at the depth of this tournament, and I'm circling 157. I know that Saturday round 2 or day 2 round 1 was a huge round for St. Cloud State, but one of the things that I was talking with Kyle Klingman about was the semifinal at 157 pounds. Larry Bomstad and Fernie Silva from Notre Dame. This is a match. Bomstad's losing in the third period, gets the reversal, gets the fall, 14-point swing based just on advancement, because that round is 7+ bonus. Ended up being 9 points you guys got, and kept Notre Dame from getting at least 7 out of this. And, you know, what's a match like that do for team morale and momentum?
Well, our morale and momentum at that point just, you know, skyrocketed. And, you know, we had a little bit of momentum going into that match from day 2 on that first round. But what Larry did was, you know, he got our fans really excited and, you know, back on board for what we were trying to accomplish. I mean, and specifically it was a head-to-head match with Notre Dame. And we knew at that point they were the team that we had to get past. So, you know, to get those points against Notre Dame, and not just those points, but those bonus points, you know, that really set us up for success for the rest of the tournament. And then, obviously, right after that, at 174, we got another pin and the consolation on the backside, and then we had another 197-pound finalist, Vince Dietz, got a pin at 197 pounds to punch his ticket in the finals. So you see how that momentum factor can have such a big influence in the tournament, and it's always been a thing that we talk about with our guys, you know, getting on that momentum train and you know, getting our fans excited and our kids get excited. So, you know, with that pin from Larry, it really ignited us and really put us over the, you know, it gave us a really good cushion in terms of a little bit of a lead there, especially after Vince's pin at 97. We had a really nice lead going into the, you know, final rounds.
All right, then we're coming back to the weights as we talked 141 pounds, you know, on the backside. Jared Oftedal, he's a guy that's been with you a couple years, Pinnacle kid. We've seen him. He had success coming through the age group levels, ultimately finishes 4th. What did this guy mean to the program?
Well, he's actually been with us for 5 years, so he's been in and out of the lineup his entire career, and he's been a starter with a national qualifier as a junior. We actually bumped him up right before the regional tournament from 33 to 41. He qualifies for the national tournament. He's a super dangerous wrestler, so, you know, he's got some skills that are kind of uncoachable. I mean, he can do certain things that you know, not a lot of kids can do, and he's a big bonus point guy, and but as far as what he's meant to our program, I mean, he's been a tremendous leader. He's an individual with such a passion to wrestle. I mean, I don't think that guy really ever missed a practice or a match in 5 years. He just loved competing. He just loved wrestling, and he loved his team. He loved his teammates, and so we're really going to miss him, and just the fact of what he represented for us, obviously on the mat, but off the mat as well.
149 pounds, James Plesky finishes 2nd, now a 2-time All-American in his first 2 trips to the national championships, a red shirt out of Stacy, and losing a heartbreaker in sudden victory in the finals, 149 pounds to Daxton Gordon of Cal Baptist. And what can you say about James Plesky that maybe the wrestling community doesn't know, and talk about his performance in Cedar Rapids?
Well, in terms of consistency, that individual had consistency. He lost a match, first tournament of the year, and sudden death, and from there he rallied off, 20-something consecutive wins, throughout the rest of the season, including not being taken down at all since the match they lost at the beginning of the season. So, that takedown by Gordon in the finals was only the second takedown that he'd given up all season. So, it was I knew it was going to be a tough match. We really wrestled well. We actually were in on a leg attack early in that match, and I thought we had two. We video reviewed it and came to the conclusion there wasn't two. But we get that 2 points. Obviously, it's a whole different match. But the guy just is a consistent performer all season long, basically his whole career since he's been here. And fortunately for us, we get him for 2 more years. So I'm kind of excited to see what the future holds for him. And I think it's pretty bright. And he doesn't say, he's really kind of a quiet kid, but then he represents his leadership quite well when he competes.
Larry Bomstad finishes as an All-American, finishing second, losing to Cody Law of Pitt Johnstown in the finals. Another guy that's been a team leader, guy that's been in the lineup just consistently throughout your time there, one of the team captains, and ultimately finishing second. Everybody's got the goal of winning a national championship. But I guess the same question: what's Larry meant to the program, and how do you sum up his tournament?
Well, he's a big time performer, and he will produce when the lights are on, and that's how he's always been. If you look at him in practice, sometimes you're like, how's this guy so good? But when you turn the lights on and there's something on the line, he steps up and gets the job done. And that's what he's done his whole career. Going back to our first national championship, 2015, it was Larry Bomstad's pin in the blood round against Maryville that really ignited us and solidified a national championship, knocked one of the Maryville wrestlers out of the tournament, and obviously we were gaining some points there and bonus points on top of that. And then just through the years, he's just been another consistent performer for us. He's just a guy that you can really lean on and count on in tough times, and that's what he did. Again this year, that pin in the semifinals. It just very similar to what he did his freshman year down in St. Louis to help us win the championship. He did the same thing for us as a senior, getting that pin in the semifinals and just really igniting our team and giving us the points that we needed to win that tournament.
Colt Nishans finishes sixth at 174 pounds. Loses early. You just talked about picking up the fall in the blood round there. That was those 2 key points plus the half-point advancement plus that placement round. You're getting placement points there. So even though that was a consolation win, that was a huge round for points. You got him for a couple more years too. So you also got another Ishans coming in behind him. So what are we looking for his season and his future in St. Cloud?
Well, he's just a sophomore, and the funny thing about him is he transferred to us from Itasca Community College after 1 year there. Never qualified for the junior college national tournament. And, he had a solid year there and everything. Never qualified, though, and comes into our program basically as a walk-on. He comes into my office. We recruited him out of high school a little bit, but at that point he wasn't sure if he wanted to wrestle or compete. But he walks into my office this past summer, and he's like, hey, Coach, I really want to wrestle here, and what do I got to do to make that happen? Obviously I gave him the opportunity, and he took advantage of it. He came in, I really didn't know what to expect out of him, coming from junior college and not even being a qualifier, but I think this program was set up just right for him in terms of the structure, the training, the individuals on the team, because he just got better and better and better throughout the entire season. So that's what really impressed me with him. And he's a super competitive kid, and he really takes a lot of emotion into the sport, and he wrestles with a lot of heart. And that's exactly what he did. To qualify for the national tournament, and then to go down there and not only place but getting bonus points for us, and then of course we get him for 2 more years. So we're pretty fortunate there, and I'm pretty proud of him.
Moving 197 pounds, Vince Dietz makes the finals. Has, again, you talked about that big fall in the semis over Evan Ramos of Shippensburg. Kind of a breakthrough performance for him after a disappointing year the year before. you got him for another year or so. I mean, what's he meant to the program? I realize I'm sound like a broken record, but I mean, it sounds like everybody has their role in the program. This is an Illinois kid, Lockport Township, same high school as actually an Olympian. Haley Augello is actually from down there as far as our women's freestyle team goes. So comes from a good wrestling culture at Lockport. Sliding in, making the finals. There's only one more step. He's got to go up the podium.
Well, others might have been surprised by his position, but for us at our coaching staff, it's something that we knew Vince could do. We not only knew it, we kind of expected it, and he just had a not only this year but even last year. He just kind of come into his own last year. Didn't have the best regional tournament last year. This year he comes in kind of with a vengeance, kind of with something to prove, not only to everybody else around him, but himself. He was really disappointed, and he really took that really hard last year at the regional tournament. So what he did throughout the season in terms of consistency and bonus points all season long, he really dominated the scene for the majority of the year at 197 pounds. And, going into the regional tournament, ends up winning the regional championship, and from going from fifth the year before. And we knew going to the national tournament, this was a guy that Vince was a guy that you really, we had big expectations for. And, if anybody overlooked him, they better not, because, Vince is a pretty dangerous individual on the mat. But great kid. He's done a lot for our program. He's really opened doors for us in terms of in the state of Illinois. He's such a positive kid, and that's what we really like about him the most. Is there isn't a time when that kid's not smiling. If he's not smiling, then there's definitely a problem, because he's got a smile on his face about 90% of the time. So he just people gravitate towards him, and him getting that big pin for us in the semis, just really giving us that big point lead that we needed going into the final rounds. And luckily, again, we have him for another year, so we're looking forward to that.
And with that final round, it's not exactly the way you want to win a championship. Is having you going 0 for 6 in the medal rounds. I mean, you don't really get to go, yeah, we got a title. It's like, okay, we got a title. It's kind of a bittersweet moment. I mean, you want your guys to end in the odds. That means you 1, 3, 5, or 7. I guess what's that like as a coach to say, all right, we won a title, but nobody won their last match?
Well, I'm going to have to be honest with you. It left a really bitter taste in my mouth, and it's something that I don't forget. Well, we're really fortunate that we won the championship, and I just keep going back to, like, what could I have done different? Did I say something that made our guys maybe relax too much? Did guys see that we had things? It looked like we kind of had things locked up, and then they kind of pulled it back a notch. So it's a situation where I'm currently evaluating a lot right now. Is what did I say that maybe could have made this happen, or what could I have said differently to eliminate what had happened? So obviously I'm very fortunate for our team winning a title, but at the same time, it left me with some concerns, to be honest with you. So I have some concerns about that final round and where we're going to go from here, as a program and into the future. I may have to do some things a little bit differently to prepare those guys for those last matches, because we definitely should have performed, we're capable of performing a lot better than what we did.
So as a coach who's won national titles at 2 different levels and has had success in firing up athletes and getting them to that next level, where do you go to try to understand what you just said? Is it a conversation with a mentor? Is it your old coach, Mike Denny? Is it somebody you've crossed paths with? How does a coach who's had success, where do you go for advice? Where do coaches like you go for advice?
Well, I think I just go right back to our kids and kind of pick their brains a little bit, and just kind of play that psychologist role a little bit, and kind of just find out what were they thinking going into those last rounds. Was it something I said, or was it did we really get outperformed? Were we really that outperformed in those last matches and so forth? So I'm just going to go right back to, I know there's some things that I could have done different that I'm going to do different. And maybe one thing is not, we had things kind of locked up at one point, and then we lost. As soon as I mentioned to our team, congratulations, guys. Now you can go out and just relax and wrestle. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should have said, maybe I shouldn't have talked about that we had things locked up, So I'm obviously second-guessing things that I've said to our guys, and maybe I need to focus differently on those medal rounds with those individuals and our coaching staff to make sure that they realize that we finish the tournament out strong and not have that kind of performance, regardless if we're winning the tournament or not. So, again, I'm kind of really disappointed about it. I'm not necessarily disappointed in our guys. I'm maybe more disappointed in myself more than anything. So I know that I've got to do some things better, and if that means talking to some veteran coaches that are that mentor me and so forth, then that's what I'll do. But I know things are going to be different for the future.
With the future, you're looking forward. You've got 8 of these 10 back. And, on paper, that's one of those things. Well, that's pretty much an easy checkbox on who the favorite is for next year. But with the landscape of Division II the way it is, I mean, you can have a team immediately. You can get better overnight, whether it be a stud high school kid that comes in and creates an immediate impact like Joey Davis did at Notre Dame College, or a transfer like we've seen with Eli Hale at Central Oklahoma. You guys can't just sit there and be like, yeah, we got everybody back. We're good to go. When does the work begin for next year?
Starts Monday. I gave these guys 2 weeks off, and then we start back training on Monday the 26th, and we just start training and working with what we have for the future. And by no means is this team the type of team that's going to sit back and go, oh, we got 8 guys coming back. We got this locked up for next year. We know that in Division II that at any time the landscape for teams can change dramatically from semester to semester. So no matter what you got coming into the season, you never know what you're going to have coming into the season in the middle of the year. So, we've never been a team that really benefits from that. We don't get a lot of transfers in second semester, those sort of things that makes an impact on our team or anything like that. We usually, what we start with is what we go with. And, so we just got to keep working hard. I know that regardless of those 8 individuals out of the 10 that are coming back, I've got some guys in our room right now that are just as hungry to get into that lineup and take over those spots as well. And they're going to cause some havoc for some of these other guys. It just goes back to the depth thing and the competition that we have in our room is, like I said, it's a very competitive room. And even though we've got those 8 guys coming back, those 8 guys might not be starters next year. And, so there's a lot of guys behind them that want that job as well.
When we look at the makeup of your staff in Division II, I mean, you've had Brady Wilson now for 7 years, and this is a guy who's, was so close to that national championship as an athlete down in Mankato at Minnesota State. And you look at who the number one assistants are throughout the course of college wrestling. A heavyweight is not always that number one assistant. What has Brady done over the years to really cement himself as you're confident as a guy that you can trust with anybody, whether it be a 25-pounder or a heavyweight? And what's he done to improve himself as a coach?
Well, I think it's just his ability to relate to the kids. He does just a tremendous job building those relationships with those guys off the mat. Spends a lot of time with those guys talking about things other than wrestling, and I think that's really elevated his game, because those guys, once he develops that relationship, that develops trust. And so he's done a really good job in terms of gaining these guys' trust. And, and a lot of times they're going to go to Brady versus coming to me with things, because he's probably got more of a solid relationship with them than I do, because he spends a lot more time with them. I spend a lot of time in, pushing papers and things like that. But he's just done a great job, and he's an individual that you can always count on. I think he's got better with his administrative skills over the years as well. And he's just really familiar with, with our system here. And I think he's really bought into it. I think it's quite different than what he had when he was at Mankato. And I think he's really bought into the system and sells it well. So we're really fortunate. I'm really fortunate to have Brady as my head assistant.
Nationally, we've had, it's spring sports cutting season. And, of course, at St. Cloud, we had touched on the sports that were cut there. Wrestling survived, and you guys have been thriving. But Eastern Michigan in Division I announced that they were cutting a number of sports, including wrestling. And being an alum of Nebraska Omaha and having to sit there and watch that as an alum and to know what your former coach, Mike Denny, had to go through, what is your advice to maybe the athletes and maybe Coach David Bolyard and his staff at Eastern Michigan on what they can do through this process?
Well, first of all, my heart goes out to him, because when I woke up yesterday, I think it was yesterday morning when that was announced, I woke up in a terrible mood. I was really upset. Those guys have done, Eastern Michigan, they've done things the right way. They just had their first All-American, I think, since 1999 or whatever. They've done things the right way this year. And then all of a sudden you have a really, solid tournament, and your first All-American since 99. You come home and they tell you your program's dropped. I mean, what a kick in the shorts. I mean, it's not right. But the thing about it is, I mean, every program in the country right now has to be concerned about their program. I mean, I'll tell you something right now. There's a day that I come into work that I'm not concerned about our program here at St. Cloud State and what the possibilities are in terms of the future and whether we're going to have a program or not. And obviously, winning championships doesn't solidify a program.
We saw that at UNO. Obviously, they get dropped the night they win a title.
Yeah, I think they won 3 in a row or whatever, and they get dropped 10 minutes after they receive their trophy. So no matter what program, you always got to be on the edge of your seat and make sure that you're doing the right things. Make sure you're communicating with your administrators and find out exactly where you're at in the whole process. And while some of that information may not be leaked to you at that time, there's always got to be a sense of you have to know what's going on. And for me, here at St. Cloud, it's one of the things that I'm always alert, ready, and on guard, as Coach Denny would say. And I know he at that time Coach Denny did not know that was going to happen. There had to be some things in some flaws out there, or maybe some hints that there's some things that weren't going right at UNO at the time. So I don't really know what to say to the Eastern Michigan folks right now. I think I would just use the example of what happened at Cleveland State here a couple years ago when they announced dropping their program. So I wouldn't give up quite yet. I'd get your alumni and boosters behind you and continue to fight the fight, and don't just allow this to happen. And I'm sure that they will, and I'm sure it's going to happen. But a good example is Cleveland State. Another good example, Fresno State. Just because they mention these things doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a possibility of getting these programs back. So we just got to keep fighting.
To clarify too, what we mean is we've seen the cuts there at St. Cloud, and it's not an indication of we've seen it. It's not necessarily performance. It's not necessarily if we've got teams that are performing well academically. They're being all academic. Like Eastern Michigan was number 1 academically 2 years ago. So it's not necessarily the measure of whether you've got good students or bad students, or good grades or bad grades, or community or not community. It can happen at any school at any time. So it's not an indictment on St. Cloud, for example, that you got to be worried about whether or not there's a future there. But enrollments are declining a lot of places. Wrestling's a way to get bodies on campus. So there's a give and take with college sports. And unfortunately, I think I was actually talking to Jim Mikowski a little bit about this last night. He goes, it used to be the business of sports. Now it's just the business. And that's something we always, as coaches and as wrestling people, have to be aware of. We've got to find our way to make every single program. And this goes for tennis. This goes for track and field, for swimming, for hockey, for baseball, any sport that could be on the block. You have to make yourself indispensable. And the problem is I think, Coach, sometimes that's a moving target, but that's a wormhole we can probably go down for hours at a time. But I want to circle back to, again, the success that you've had. 3 national championships. Congratulations. And any final words out there for the Minnesota wrestling community to keep an eye on your program moving forward?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on your show, and I appreciate all the support that we've had in Minnesota, specifically Central Minnesota. People have been great and so supportive of what we're doing here or trying to accomplish. So I really thank our wrestling community. It's been positive, and I just hope that in the future that coaches can feel comfortable about sending their student athletes to St. Cloud State.
Support wrestling in the land of 10,000 wrestlers by subscribing to The Guillotine. 9 issues a year for just $20, the best value in Minnesota wrestling. Subscribe at theguillotine.com/subscribe.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.